Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be exploring the wonderful life of Eli Whitney, and we're going to explore some of his accomplishments and achievements throughout the years. We're also going to talk a little bit about his family. Eli Whitney was born on December 8th, 1765 in Westborough, Massachusetts. Just some more background history on Eli Whitney. He was born into a wealthy farming family who could afford for him to go to college, and his father operated the farm with the rest of his family, but Eli Whitney went out and went to Yale. He showed a remarkable interest in machines and mechanics from a very young age, and he was very interested in his education, so he pursued a career at Yale University. So Eli Whitney was able to find a problem with the cotton market, and he discovered that the seeds were very difficult to extract from the cotton, and he was able to develop a prototype that essentially was able to remove the seeds from the cotton. And it did this by spinning gears that removed the cotton from the seeds. So while this may seem like a small invention, this was actually revolutionary in the 17 and 1800s. It was able to streamline the process of creating cotton, and it was able to make cotton clothing much more accessible to the everyday person. It actually saved a lot of time in the production of cotton and saved a lot of time for slaves to produce the cotton. However, it had an inverse effect on slavery. Slave demand actually went up after his invention. This was because the market then became very profitable, which opened it up to many entrepreneurs, and it actually increased the demand of slavery. So soon after Eli Whitney developed this invention, he tried to get the patent for it, and he actually wrote a letter to his father, which explained to him his situation. He was still debating whether he should finish college or whether he should create the cotton gin and really invest all his effort into that. When Eli Whitney first wrote home to his father about his news, he informed his father that he should keep the news secret and that he should not inform anyone else about his discoveries in order to keep it private. However, he could inform his family and his sisters. He was actually able to find an investor that would help him massively produce it as long as he was able to finish developing the cotton gin. What ended up happening was he applied for the cotton gin patent. However, news of his invention leaked, and there were actually several competitors who were trying to also make it first, and his lab was even raided at one point and all his stuff was destroyed. However, in 1794, he eventually secured a patent, becoming one of the first individuals to do so in the United States. Initially, people were amazed at his new invention, and it made a huge impact very early on. In 1803, Eli Whitney discovered interchangeable parts, and he started applying them to muskets. And essentially what interchangeable parts did was it was easier to create different components and put them together. The non-skilled worker was able to more easily do that on a production line. Although he was not the single inventor of interchangeable parts, he was one of the first pioneers in that industry. So using this invention, Eli Whitney was able to create the 1816 and 1812 musket, which was used during the war. Eli Whitney was also a huge supporter of education, and he had a strong emphasis on hands-on learning. So Eli Whitney married Henrietta Edwards, who was born in 1786 in New Haven. Eli Whitney's father, Eli Whitney Sr., died at a very young age. Eli Whitney's mother was Elizabeth Fay, who was born in 1765. Eli Whitney had one son named Eli Whitney Jr., and he also helped raise and educate his son's two sisters. Eli Whitney's impacts are still felt today through his many inventions and impacts on engineering, and his focus on education helped educate many children for many generations to come. Eli Whitney had a huge economic impact on his generation. He was able to create a huge source of money for his country. Something that is very interesting is that initially, many people believed that Eli Whitney was actually black and that he was a slave, and this was a misconception that was taught in many schools in the late 1900s. In 1798, Eli Whitney actually established a factory that was called Whitneyville in 1798. It was one of the first factories that used a large amount of machine tools. Whitneyville was a project that Eli Whitney worked on for over 25 years. A little more about Eli Whitney's legal troubles. He had to engage in several lawsuits against numerous attackers. While he was eventually able to win, like I mentioned earlier, it was costly on his resources, which he did not have a lot of at the time. Not only was his victory in securing this patent historic for the Industrial Revolution, it also set a precedent for what legal battles would look like in the future of the United States, and it also set a precedent for the protection of intellectual property. So, due to Eli Whitney's abundant success in his career, he was able to plant himself as a historic figure in the Industrial Revolution. He also served as a role model for many other inventors and people in general. One of Eli Whitney's final accomplishments in engineering was his change to the milling machine. Although milling machines did exist before he was alive, he added several key components to it that made them a lot more successful. His milling machine was actually so successful that his standardized version was used for over 150 years. This milling machine was used for cutting metal. Eli Whitney's cause of death was prostate cancer in 1825, and he died in New Haven.